Hello again. 9 years ago, I gave my first talk in America and in English at the Walden Woods Project. But what are 9 years between friends? In his Walden, Thoreau shows us how after many years we can remember each other as if we saw one another only a day ago. He says, in one heavy thunder shower, the lightning struck a large pitch pine across the pond, making a very conspicuous and perfectly regular spiral groove from the top to bottom, an inch or more deep. He pays attention to such small details over the course of 9 years. And 4 or 5 inches wide as you would groove a walking stick. I passed it again the other day and was struck with awe on looking up and beholding that mark, now more distinct than ever, where a terrific and resistless bolt came down out of the harmless sky 8 years ago. Only at the end of the second sentence do we realize that he's speaking of a span of 8 young, long years in such a way that you might imagine only a few days, only a day, or even a single hour have passed. That lightning strike, lasting a mere second in time, left its mark on a tree which was believed lost and forgotten to others. But 8 years later, its mark in Thoreau's attention is still alive. This is what he called living deliberately at Walden Pond. This is how we learn to see and pay attention to one another after 9 years. 9 years ago, I came here to see you and Walden Pond. After all these years, I hope what you can see in me is that the spiral grooves carved by the resistless lightning of Henry David Thoreau's thoughts have become more distinct than before. At that time, I announced my translation of Walden had been published. Today, I am here to announce the publication of my translation of Waldo Emerson's Nature. Oh. The work of the man who gave Thoreau not only a piece of land to build his cabin, but also inspired him to build castles in the air. I started my previous talk here with a poem from Rumi. This time, allow me to begin with a rubai by Omar Khayyam in Persian first, to give you a feeling of the music that flows in his poetry and our language. After all, Thoreau did like both poetry and music. Yaran, به مرافقت چو دیدار کنید باید که ز دوست یاد بسیار کنید چون باده خوشگوار نوشید به هم نوبت شو به ما رسد نگونسار کنید. Which in my own English translation reads, oh friends, when you meet, it's almost a literal translation. But I don't say literal translations are always good. It happens to be literal. Oh, friends, when you meet in friendship and trust, you should remember the friend that you lost. Drinking together when his turn arrives, fill up his glass and pour it on his dust. My dear friend, the late Professor Robert Richardson, who along with my other good friend Wallace Kaufman hosted me during my 2015 visit to Concord, is no longer with us anymore. Today, let us pour the wine of Omar Khayyam's poetry onto the dust of Henry David Thoreau and Robert Richardson. We gathered here in 2015 and made a memory, a beautiful one. I have lived in that memory, and it has lived in me every day for almost a decade, a memory made even more vivid and meaningful by the continuous lightning bolts of thought coming to me from my ongoing study of Rumi, Thoreau, and other Persian and American poets. Thoreau says the crowds of men who merely spoke Greek and Latin tongues in Middle Ages were not entitled by accident of birth to read the works of genius written in those languages, for those were not written in that Greek or Latin which they knew, but in the select language of literature. It was through Thoreau's insight that I noticed that Thoreau and Rumi spoke a single tongue, the select language of literature. The language we speak on our streets are accidents of birth. The language of our writers resemble it only superficially and sometimes even deliberately. It was the discovery of this common select language and not the language we speak on our streets as an accident that has brought us together in this literary congregation and deepened my understanding of Thoreau's Walden and guided me as I prepared my translation of Emerson's Nature. Thoreau and Rumi speak to one another within me in their own select language, and I quietly listen in. Today, I have traveled here to share one of their conversations with you. In one of my favorite sentences in Walden, Thoreau says, "If we respected what is inevitable and has a right to be, music and poetry would resound along the streets." I looked at this intriguing sentence, the way Thoreau, after 8 years, looked at that tree struck by the resistless bolt of lightning, and tried to imagine how it would be for music and poetry to fill a street. Would people install loudspeakers to play music and walk around keep reciting Shakespeare's plays and sonnets to one another? No, I do not think Thoreau should be taken too literally. It was here that I noticed in Rumi's biography, there is a story that embodies Thoreau's sentence, revealing deeper layers of its meaning to me. One day, Rumi, with a host of his disciples, was passing through the streets of Goldsmith's Bazaar when he heard the harmonious noise of hammers that goldsmiths were using on their golden pieces. On hearing this ordinary sound, an involuntary passionate feeling of ecstasy rose in Rumi's soul. In an instant of mystical rapture, Rumi forgot himself, the bazaar, the crowds of people, and all his disciples, and began to dance in the middle of a crowded public place. This has happened. His disciples joined their spiritual teacher in a harmonious obedience. Salahuddin Zarkub, before whose shop Rumi's dancing had begun, was busy with his golden pieces at this time. As he noticed Rumi's strange mood and ecstasy, he pointed to his workers to keep hammering away and joined in that strange dance himself. All the other goldsmiths had given up their work and were watching Rumi's delightful dance in wonder. Rumi was still dancing when Zarku ordered his workers to continue their hammering as long as Rumi kept dancing with no regrets for wasting golden pieces. The whole bazaar was watching Rumi's ecstatic dance until the old Zakub became tired and asked for Rumi's forgiveness and sat aside. Rumi followed the old man and stopped dancing too. It is with Thoreau's sentence that I came to a deeper understanding of what Rumi did on that day in the bazaar. Bazaar, a Persian word meaning market. I would never have captured the true spirit of what Thoreau said if I had not seen how Rumi danced on that day on the street. Translators are not mere messenger pigeons, carrying written words tied to their legs, unaware of their meaning or the world through which they travel. They are the bees of human civilization, flying from flower to flower, assisting in the miracle of pollination. They observe, carefully choose this discernment, gather pollen, and transfer it into honey within themselves. The message does not merely ride on them. It passes through them in a transformative way, moving one world to another. That hammering noise was an ordinary sound. It turned into music in Rumi's mind. That is how our streets fill with music. The change should happen in us. Then the mere words we exchange with each other will sound like music. Then we can speak and dance to each other's words. A mere mastery of English is not enough to understand the soul of Walden, nor is a mastery of Persian enough to translate it. Part of the true message of our poets, I mean humanities poets, lie in their silence. In a way, Rumi and Thoreau are themselves translators of their own silence. At the end of many of his poems, Rumi reminds the reader of silence. He mentions the word silence after many of his ghazals. He does this so often that some even consider silence to be Rumi's pen name. He's one of the most prolific poets in history, and he started writing poetry at the age of 40 and continued until the age of 60. Through Persian poets, I learned to pay attention to the unwritten words involved. Thoreau's silence gives meaning to a sentence in Walden where he writes, "My days in the woods were not very long ones. Yet I usually carried my dinner of bread and butter and read the newspaper in which it was wrapped. At noon, sitting amid the green pine boughs, which I had cut off, and to my bread was imparted some of their fragrance, for my hands were covered with a thick coat of pitch." Here, Thoreau doesn't mention a single word about eating. But when he says he reads the newspaper in which his food was wrapped and smells the pine pitch on his hands, we understand the food has already been eaten. Elsewhere in Walden, he says, "I would not stand between any man and his genius. I would not stand between any man and his genius." The passage above is a good example of how Thoreau trusts our genius and does not say too much. He doesn't say, "I ate the food." Now, Thoreau, despite his sharp criticism of his country and culture, considered his country relatively free. In Russian literature, in the novel One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, Alexander Solzhenitsyn describes in full detail what Thoreau left unsaid in Walden. In that novel, an inmate kept in confinement, cold and hunger, his name is Shuhov, describes the moments in which he eats a piece of bread. He says, you have to eat with all your mind on the food. Like now, nibbling the bread, bit by bit, working the crumbs into a paste, sucking it into your cheeks. And now, and how good it tasted, that soggy black bread. This is one of those moments when literature steps in to pose quintessential questions to the human conscience. What would be the difference between living in a relatively free country and living in confinement if Thoreau had also gone into similar detail about what he ate at Walden? Then let us extend this question to all the details of our life. We lose our liberty little by little, our freedom. Shuhov, Solzhenitsyn's protagonist in One Day, is reduced to something less than an act in that grim sentence, where a man thinks only of eating and staying alive. At least animals are free to gaze or hunt according to their own instinctive understanding of life. That is why Thoreau went to the woods to live deliberately, not merely to live and survive hunger and cold. In Walden, he shows us how even in a free world, many traps await to reduce human life to an animal existence. One such trap is described in Walden when Thoreau writes, a lady once offered me a mat, but I had no room to spare within the house, nor time to spare within or without to shake it. I declined it, preferring to wipe my feet on the sod before my door. It is best to avoid the beginnings of evil. Clearly, Thoreau believed that had he accepted that map, his cabin might have become his prison, and Walden Woods a kind of gulag. Years ago, one of the early readers of Walden in Iran once asked, Thoreau claims he left nothing unsaid. We discuss Walden. Translation is not the end of my job or any translator's job. It's the beginning. So he asked, Thoreau claims he left nothing unsaid during his stay in the woods. So why didn't he mention anything about his outhouse or toilet? Later, I heard the same question in the US too. But my own answer was he didn't speak unnecessarily about eating either. Only in comparison with Solzhenitsyn's passage do we realize that in Thoreau's silence about eating lies a kind of human dignity. This is how these books shed light on life for me. Even when we are silent, even when they are silent, they help me understand profound truths about life. In Walden, Thoreau describes America as a relatively free country. Solzhenitsyn portrays Russia under the Soviet Union and in the grip of communist tyranny. But I honestly believe that even Soviet tyranny, as horribly described in one day, is relative. We will never truly know what absolute freedom or absolute tyranny are. What we do is this. What we know is this. In everything we do, however small, we are choosing a path that leads either to freedom or bondage. Are we drifting toward tyranny or walking towards freedom? The real question is not to move or not to move, but where to move. The seed of both tyranny and freedom is first planted within our soul, our mind. That is what Rumi, Thoreau, and Solzhenitsyn tells us through their close attention to the nuances of human behavior. Literature entered my life very early through grandparents and parents who were unschooled, yet kept the divan of great Persian poets close at hand, like sacred scripture. This is a scene I have seen many times in life. They kissed those books and placed them down or picked them out with both hands as a sign of reverence. They paved the way for these conversations between the poets of my land and the rest of the world in my soul. Years later, today I believe that however rich our own literature and culture is, we will still live in a cultural vacuum if we do not pay attention to others. If we do not compare and contrast cultures with each other in a productive way. In those times, grandparents, parents, and children did not spend time only on their cell phones or laptops, as if you could kill time without injuring eternity. Saadi, Rumi, and Hafiz brought me to Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson, who in turn brought me to scholars and lovers of literature in contemporary America. Conversations with the past and present poets and scholars in America became a natural part of my everyday life. They turned daily living into a continuous intellectual and a spiritual engagement. What I wrote and read for you today are the intellectual and poetic echoes of my ongoing thoughts and musings, not necessarily the product of formal academic lecture or research. Thoreau writes, "The man who goes alone can start today, but he who travels with another must wait until that other is ready. And it may be a long time before they get off." He speaks about the man who goes alone. But with all due respect to Thoreau and his sharp insights, his words here are not always true. Sometimes the man who travels with a woman may journey more successfully and more fruitfully through life. Mariam has always been a wonderful fellow traveler. In Persian, the word for wife is hamsar, and the word for fellow traveler adds only a single letter to the word and becomes hamsafar. So the changes happens in only a single letter. She's been both for me. Wonderful, she's been a wonderful fellow traveler in the years we have studied and lived together. With a deeper awareness of what truly matters, she embodies Thoreau's counsel. Instead of 3 meals a day, if it be necessary, eat but once. Eat but one. Instead of 100 dishes, 5. And reduce other things in proportion. This is Mariam's quiet specialty. And she does it not merely to save money, to invest in a richer material life, but to make room for a richer spiritual life. My current trip to America is yet another testament to how fruitful a man's journey can be when he travels with a woman. We have come with a new translation, this time of Emerson's Nature, the result of years of reading and reflection. This is Mariam's first trip to America. On our way here, we met a 5-year-old sweet little girl named Yareen on the plane, who spoke with us for several hours. Mariam tried to practice her English with her, and Yareen helped ease some of her fears of speaking the language, of arriving in a new land. Long before we landed on American soil, Yareen had already welcomed Mariam to this country. With her smiles, her innocent eyes, and her honest, childlike words. That encounter with 5-year-old Yareen might well represent the true destination of all great literature. Here, in an unexpected moment of connection, the long conversations I have had with the giants of classical world literature brought me to an innocent child from another world. This is the ultimate human connection. I had several literary books with me on the plane, but I put them all down and just talked to you. Dr. Robert Richardson's final book, Nearer the Heart's Desire, is a dual biography of Omar Khayyam and his renowned translator, Edward Fitzgerald. In his introduction to that book, he writes to Ali Reza Taghdarreh, whose translation of Walden into Persian demonstrates how the Silk Road of the mind now is a two-way street. This Silk Road of the mind is not merely traveled by scholars, poets, writers, or scientists. We met that beautiful 5-year-old Yareen on this sacred road, a path that brings peace, safety, love, and friendship to the children, women, and men of this world. It is in this dream that Mariam and I have come this time with our new translation, a rendering of Wolf and Roldo Emerson's Nature. On this same path, I visited Emerson's Old Manse and began the careful reading and translation of his book in his very room, in the very room Emerson wrote it. 9 years ago, I started the reading of nature in Emerson's own room. It was a very beautiful, symbolic moment of my life. The whole countries meet in individuals sometimes. Once our translation is published, our real work will begin by starting study and discussion groups and writing circles in which we will share questions and seek answers together. We have a careful plan to translate more works by Emerson and Thoreau. Is there a better way to bring together the minds, souls, and hearts of people across the world in friendship and mutual understanding? Thoreau says, the greatest compliment that was ever paid me was when one asked me what I thought and attended to my answer by reading and translating, and most importantly, discussing his works. We feel we are not just paying compliments to him, but to his culture and country. Thank you.
I think we might start with taking a few questions from our in-person audience, and then we'll move on to questions from our virtual audience. Would anyone like to address a question to our
Please.
I'm unfamiliar with Rumi. When was he born?
He is a 12th century poet, Persian poet.
Thank you.
Yes.
More a comment than a question. When you're describing Rumi dancing to the sounds of the bazaar, it reminded me of so many instances in A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers, where every evening, he hears these sounds from a distance. Could be people banging on things, could be dogs barking, could be bells in the distance, and all of those are kind of pathways to his own experience of ecstasy in the moment.
Sounds are alive.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please.
As a childhood educator, I'm always interested in when children first discover the beauty of thought and of wonderful, important thoughts. And I'm wondering when you just went, aha, about Thoreau.
When I first discovered even Thoreau,
Yes.
Thoreau came to me in several gradual encounters. Sometimes I read his sentences in dictionaries, and they captivated me. But I remember the first time I loved a sentence by Thoreau was a sentence I heard on my radio, on VOA's breakfast show. There was a radio announcer by the name of Phil Irwin, who died a few years ago. He used to say, mention a quote at the end of every breakfast show whenever he hosted it. One sentence was this: a man who goes alone, the man who goes alone can start today, but he who travels with another must wait until the other person is ready. It stayed in my mind without knowing it was from Thoreau. When I was reading Walden, I was still, I think, about 10 pages away from the sentence, when I suddenly felt I'm going to read this sentence in this book. As I turned more pages and finally saw the sentence, I was surprised how I could feel I would find it in this book. It's something really happened in my life. I felt I'm going to see that sentence in the book. Yes. Oh, hello. Yes, please.
Hi. So last time you were here, it feels like yesterday.
Yes.
So last time I asked the question, what was the most difficult part of translating the Warden? But today I'm going to turn the question around. What is the most rewarding part of translating Warden? And also, do you talk to your readers? How your readers read the book that you translated, and whether there's anything that makes you feel that all your work is worthwhile?
Yes, thank you. One of the most interesting aspects of Walden and its readers is that they never put it down. They continue to read and reread it and keep asking deeper questions about it. It becomes the subjects that Thoreau puts forth become subjects of the entire life. So one of the most beautiful aspects of Walden is that it has brought lifelong friends for me in life. Whether in America or in China, we've been friends for many years, or within our own family. These books bring people closer to each other within a family. within a nation, between nations. I really don't know what magic lies in them, but this is one of the most rewarding aspects of dealing with Walden for me. Any friend, any friendship that takes roots through Walden is lasting.
It's beautiful.
Yes. Whenever we study this book and see each other for the first time, we feel we've been friends for many years. Yes. I think it's because Thoreau was honest to himself. When you are honest to himself, you're honest to the rest of the world. And honesty binds people together in lasting relationship.
Maybe we'll turn. Mike, did you have a question?
Oh, I was sort of curious about Thoreau's relationship with Sadi. He speaks very intimately of Sadi in his journal, and very likely is alluding to Sadi at the opening of the reading chapter of Walden. I was just wondering if you had anything to comment on about how Thoreau and Sadi's.
I feel the fragrance of Sadi's soul, words, literary elegance, thoughts, in everything Thoreau says in Walden. I have extensive notes about the similarities and connections that I find between Thoreau's life and his words and his actual life with Sadi. I think it can be the subject of a very long discussion. That's why I was telling one of the friends when we were discussing before this meeting that I believe that through Thoreau and Emerson, the American culture and literature come closer to Iran than the British culture and literature. At least it's the way I feel. I feel very close to American culture. I love Shakespeare, and like all of you and many people in the world study Shakespeare a lot, but I feel closer to Thoreau. I promised to write some essays about it, how I feel I can see Sadi in Thoreau. And when I study Sadi, I see Thoreau in him. Thoreau says he never met a man who was completely awake. And he said this when Emerson was alive. I wonder, was Emerson not fully awake? But when it comes to Sadi, he says that Sadi is living in him. So was he closer to us than to America? I don't know. These are the questions that are open. Yes, sir.
When your translation was published, I guess two questions. Did you write some kind of an introduction or a preface?
Yes.
And if so, what did you tell your Iranian readers?
Actually, yes. Actually, I spoke about level of being awake in my introduction. I'm sorry, I should have brought a translation of my introduction here, but I will translate it while I stay in Concord and put it online. I think it may be a very interesting translation. I have considered the fish that lie in darkness at the bottom of Walden Pond while Thoreau is trying to catch them. I have considered them creatures that are farthest from being awake, and Thoreau is trying to wake them up and compare them to the people whom he tries to find, who are better awake, more awake. That's what I have tried to investigate in Walden, level of being awake. And it's still my question. When he says he didn't meet anyone who was fully awake, was he thinking of Emerson? It's a difficult question.
I think we'll turn to taking a few questions from our virtual participants.
Okay. There's a couple. So what is your favorite poem by Rumi?
My favorite poems by Rumi, the one I can tell you in English is you are not a drop in an ocean. You are an ocean in a drop. In Persian, that would be تو یکی تو نیستی ای خوش رفیق بلکه گردونی و دریای عمیق. Oh sweet friend, you are not just you, you are the universe and deep ocean and a deep ocean. It's Rumi rarely has a poem which cannot become your favorite. He started poetry at the age of 40. Some psychologists say you have to education or learning or your personality is finished at the age of 7. His life and his personality transformed at the age of 40. And he became one of the most prolific poets in history. He didn't write his poetry. He just danced and said them and somebody else wrote them for him.
Is it harder to live deliberately, Thoreau's ideal, in a world connected by digital technologies and the demands they make on our time and attention, or is that just our excuse for not living deliberately?
I think technology can help us to live a better deliberate life. It all depends on us. I think it has helped me. It's through technology that I really could connect to Thoreau scholars, could access to resources about Thoreau, meet you. It's a deliberate meeting.
People on Zoom.
Yes. How would you characterize the differing writing styles and differing strengths of Emerson's and Thoreau's styles?
Thoreau, I should read Walden again to see if it is an easier book for me because I have changed. But both of them torture me equally. I do not know. Thoreau said, simplify, simplify. Somebody said, okay, if you say simplify, then why are you using the same word twice? So he just said simplify, but he kept complicating our reading with everything he said. But I think I find more ecstasy, more warmth and passion in Thoreau's prose than in Emerson's nature, for example. That's my own personal feeling. It warms me when I read Walden. I'd love to repeat it. It's not just for lessons that he teaches, it's for the beauty of his thought, for the beauty of his words, his analogies, that I keep going back to the book and study it. One of the things that I think in Gulag they did to the prisoners was that they killed beauty in their life. They didn't allow them to have access to beautiful things, to art, to painting, to good writing. Thoreau keeps our sense of beauty alive in us. He writes beautifully. There is not a moment. Each time you approach Walden, you discover new literary beauty and elegance.
I'd like to ask a final question, if I may. when you share your translation of Walden or any of the other transcendentalists with people in Iran, especially young people, what is their reaction when they read the words of Thoreau?
They find part of the Persian spirit. They are familiar with Thoreau, what Thoreau says, and immediately think that Thoreau is a stranger in America and is closer to them, and ask me, are there people like him in America today? But they say, yes, the Thoreau Society is the most important society in America. Walden Wood's project, so many books written about Thoreau in America. Artists, musicians remember him. People love him. But I think works need to be done to bring Thoreau to Iranian children. Unfortunately, they are taken to digital entertainments, and they have given up reading even Persian poetry and literature. That's a tragedy we should really think about seriously and try to come up with solutions together across cultures. It's very good for our children to know that our roots are so connected with each other, that our giants paid attention to each other, quoted each other, were inspired by each other. There are many stories and poems in Rumi's poetry that you feel have been inspired by Thoreau's and Emerson. We are very close to each other, if not politically, poetically.
Thank you, Ali. That was just
Thank you very much.
inspiring. Thanks.
Thank you very much.